Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 14 of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. I am Matthew King, got Jacob Sullivan along for the ride this week. We are going to again have to put off our college football talk. There's been some new developments going on, some things falling out, some guests falling out, but I promise you, it is coming. It is on its way. We will have it by the start of college football season 1000%. Just things are changing so much. They're going to continue to change for 2 years. So it is going to be a hot topic for a while, but we will have that by the start of college football season. Absolutely a promise from me to you. So that is on its way, but we do have some baseball here this week as well as some football. There's been a couple free agency moves today. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about some teams that could make the leap from non-playoff to playoff team. That'll be coming up to close things out. But we are going to start with baseball. First of all, I do want to say Jacob did absolutely destroy me in the home run derby bracket prediction. I didn't even really make up for it that much in the All-Star game prediction since Aaron Judge did not win MVP. I meant to choose the other big Yankee. Just autocorrect changed my answer. So
the one that destroys baseball's hopes and dreams.
His baseball is a very long way, but hey, he's on the IL, so the Mariners don't have to see him next week, which is a good thing for the Mariners, but unfortunate for the Yankees. A fun player to watch. So because Jacob beat me in the home run derby bracket, he is going to have a decree. He'll have that ready next week, and he'll just get a talk for a little while I mute my mic and just have to sit back and listen. So whatever that's going to be about, hopefully it's not too bad. We aren't digging into the stuff that we know drives each other crazy yet. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be coming. Just talked about the Yankees a little bit. So let's talk about a team in that division who is not playing as well as the Yankees are, and that is their rivals, the Boston Red Sox, who have just been absolutely atrocious in the last couple of weeks. They have really gone from a strong playoff contender to potentially a seller. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but Jacob, the Red Sox, I mean, that 28-5 loss to Toronto kind of woke a lot of people up to what was going on in Boston, because since the Saturday before the All-Star break, that was July 16th, they have been outscored in that stretch of time 68-16. That is just absolutely mind-boggling. That is terrible. 6 games, and they've allowed 68 runs. It just shines a light on, I think, the big issue for this team, which is pitching. They just don't have the pitching to slow down these lineups in the American League, especially in the AL East. I know you have some other concerns with them, but I mean, I think it's got to start with pitching, especially now. Chris Sale breaking his finger in his second start back. They just can't really catch a break with that rotation.
Yeah, that TV got revenge on Sale, but the AL East is just a crazy place right now, and it seems like we have just been baffled by the changes that we've seen each and every month of the season. I mean, at first it looked like Toronto and New York were going to duke it out for first place, and Tampa was happy at getting that pretty for sure wild card spot, and then Boston and Baltimore were doing a whole lot of nothing. And then you fast forward a month and New York is starting to pull ahead. Toronto and Tampa are fighting to retain at least divisional contention. Boston is heating up, looks like a really solid wild card contender, and Baltimore keeps dropping. The Yankees have made it pretty clear they hold the AL East crown. The rest of the teams are just fighting for that wild card spot, and that includes Baltimore, and less so Boston now. It seems like everyone's doing their best to stay in those spots, and Boston is just in a free fall. Now, whether it's getting scored 28 runs against you, or you say it's the pitching, that defense has been abysmal. They lost 9 of their last 11, and like you were mentioning, the run differential, I saw a chart the other day. They posted it yesterday or the day before online of their run differential on the year, and started out pretty normal, about 0, and they climbed pretty well in June, and then out of nowhere, you just see it plummet. And it went from like plus 30 to like minus 20 in a week and a half's time. Just ridiculous. They're struggling to find the strike zone. They can't seem to make simple outs. They're getting injuries. It just, you name it, it's not a well-functioning baseball team.
And it's happened twice now in the last week in that stretch of time I had talked about since July 16th, where they've had outfielders, you mentioned the defense, be camped where they think a fly ball is going and just lose it, and they're nowhere even close. The ball's
Like
landing
30
on the warning
feet away.
track.
Yeah.
It's just abysmal defense. And for a team that's got so much talent, a ton of young talent as well, that look like, World Series contenders the last couple of years, all of a sudden they've just completely fallen apart. Like you said, they're free falling out of control. I don't really know if they're going to be able to stop this, especially with the trade deadline approaching. They're going to have to make some decisions quick because they've got some big names that are going to likely be free agents next season that they're going to have to decide, do we let them just walk for free because we still have a chance to get in the playoffs, or do we get something back for these guys? Right now, they're 3 games out of the last wild card behind the Mariners. They are tied with Cleveland, who they are playing right now in a series. So there's still opportunities there because, of course, they get to play the Blue Jays and the Rays, who are both ahead of them. They're done playing the Mariners. Thank goodness for Mariners fans, because those games were rough this year. But it's the clock's ticking on Boston. And let's go ahead and, I guess, segue into our next segment, which we are going to look at some teams and decide if they should be buyers or sellers at the trade deadline. And we're obviously going to start with the Red Sox. Some of the guys that are going to be gone next year, JD Martinez and Nathan Eovaldi, they're both going to be gone next year, going to be free agents. Xander Bogaerts, it is very expected that he will opt out of his contract. And then they aren't making much progress with Rafael Devers, who could be a free agent after next season. Bogaerts and Devers are massive potential future pieces for these teams. They could also be, I guess, a rental for this year. That's a pretty steep cost for a rental, though. But JD Martinez could be a guy that a lot of these teams, especially with the NL having the DH, he could be a very tempting piece to where they can get quite a bit back for who's been a very consistent and big bat for years. I think Boston's going to be sellers. I think JD Martinez will likely be gone. I think Eovaldi is 100% going to be gone. The question for me is Bogaerts and Devers. Do they try and keep them, try and work something out, or if they try to get some pieces in return?
Yeah, I see them being a seller. Even when they were rolling, the word that I heard most often was cautious buyers. When they were in a decently comfortable wild card spot, they're like, we're not going to make big splashes. We want to make a run. Sure. Who doesn't? But not at the cost of our future, because they know how crowded that division and that wild card is going to be. Now that they are seeing those struggles, they're getting some injuries. And to be honest, yes, they face off against the teams that they have to beat to remain a wild card contention, but they're not easy teams. They have a pretty difficult schedule remaining. I see them selling. And you mentioned a lot of names. Xander, I could see being dished. JD Martinez, Jackie Bradley Jr. I mean, some of those names that Kiki Hernandez, names that you kind of associate with Boston, their time is coming up. They're going to be free agents by the end of this year, or end of next year. Teams are going to pay a premium for them. They have kind of to think of this bad luck run as a blessing in disguise, because they have a lot of guys who, like you mentioned, are going to walk free in the near future that they could really give a boost to their future for and get really good dividends for when, if they do roll the dice and try to win it out, there's still no guarantee that they're going to hang on to any of these guys looking forward.
I think Bogaerts is a very intriguing name to me. I think he's the most intriguing. I don't think they give up on Devers, especially him under club control next season. They can try to work on an extension this
because this isn't a tear down of like 4 or 5 years down the line. This is a hold on. This is way too crowded. We can't do this. Let's look at 2-3 years.
Exactly. But Bogaerts, with him likely opting out at the end of the year, that's the reason I'm not sure how confident they are that they can extend him, that they can work something out. So I think that is going to be a very interesting name to watch here as the deadline approaches. Next, let's stay in that division, go to the Baltimore Orioles, who are in a very interesting spot as well. You know, nobody really anticipated them being contenders, but they're right there sitting at 500 right now. Have some intriguing guys. Trey Mancini, obviously, everyone knows his story, battling cancer and coming back, just looking like a fantastic ball player, looks better than when he left. Jorge Lopez, who is an all-star, and Anthony Santander, who's had a pretty solid season, kind of a breakout year for Baltimore. The interesting thing about them is do they really want to buy if they have all these young guys that are still making their way up? You know,
Exactly.
These guys are right on the horizon. Do you want to go ahead and ship some of them off because maybe you're not as close now to making the playoffs? It's just such a tricky spot. I think they're going to end up being small sellers. I'd love to see Mancini stay. I don't know if he's going to. I'd like to see him be an Oriole for life. Jorge Lopez is going to be a very intriguing bullpen arm for a lot of these teams. I think he's likely gone. And Santander, I don't see leaving. I think they sell some of these veterans that are on short-term contracts and pitching, but I think for the most part, they stand pat. But I think small sellers is how I define Baltimore.
See, and I don't even go that far. I think they're neither a buyer or a seller. I think that they can make some moves, but they aren't going to be moves that take away wins of this season. They might make some shifting, but they do want to build on the crew that they have now. Like you said, there's a lot of young guys coming up. And to be honest, their vets are not going to fetch the asking price that some of those Boston guys are. It's not as comparable. And so even with Baltimore actually just slightly behind Boston in the standings as we're recording this, I don't think that boosting the farm system is on their minds whatsoever. I think that you are looking for those younger, more team-controlled players. And again, Baltimore doesn't really need to make a lot of moves to be a winner here. They're kind of gaining ground on their own as those younger players develop. So if they bolster their current squad a bit, again, looking for guys that will improve them 2-3 years from now, but not giving up on their current win streak and their current success. I think that it's a lot easier to do what they want to do in the off season than it is in July. And so that's why I think they might make little moves here and there, but I think for the most part, their strategy is going to be in the off season.
And they also have the same problem Boston does have, and that's they're going to play a tough schedule. They got to play those AL East teams that are ahead of them. They can take them out and really eat up some ground, but do they really like their odds, especially their rotation? Still a major issue for Baltimore against those high-powered lineups. That is going to be very, very tough. Also, Tampa's got some injury issues, so that's taken out some of their lineup. So the opportunity is there for one of these teams to make a move, but I think the safe bet is definitely Baltimore, minimize what they're doing. But like I said, small sellers is still how I define them.
And you also have to look at what do you think each team would consider a success? Because a team like Baltimore, with how their season started, a huge success is going to be snagging a wild card spot. They know they're not going to win a World Series. They're just, it's not doable with the teams that they have to go up against in the postseason. And so if they do what they need to do, make those small moves, keep their success going, and look to the future, and they're like, hey, we got in a wild card spot and we got knocked out. We got more than one playoff game this year because that's more than most. That's a win for us. That is a lot better than how, a team like the Yankees or the Astros would take falling in the first round of the playoffs.
I'd argue that and say Baltimore finishing around 500 would be a big success for them from where they were at last season. I think it is unbelievable the small success they've had already this year. It's been really awesome. Let's go ahead and keep moving. We're going to stay in the American League. We're going to head to a team that we both know the answer to this. The question is, what magnitude do they sell? And that's going to be the Los Angeles Angels. This team's just falling apart. They're falling behind everyone. The Rangers have passed them. They're way behind. both the Mariners and the Astros in the division. And then, of course, the teams ahead of them in the wild card aren't going to let up at all either. So this team's definitely a seller. Noah Syndergaard will likely be gone. I don't see any way he's still with the Angels. But now the question raises, how much do they sell? You know, they've got some very big names, of course, Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, two of the biggest names in baseball, arguably the two biggest names in baseball. Do they even contemplate trading either of those guys? There's been reports that teams are calling about Shohei Ohtani, seeing his availability. The Angels are saying absolutely not thus far. Do they think about moving a veteran like Mike Trout, who, you know, has had some injury issues? Because whatever's going on with the Angels doesn't seem to be working. I, for one, think that trading Ohtani or Trout would be an awful move for the Angels. I think that they need to invest more in pitching. Trading Trout and Ohtani, especially Ohtani, takes away from the pitching, and trading Trout, you're going to get a lot back. But what do you do with that talent? Are you getting guys that you know for sure are major league ready? There's just too many question marks. Losing a guy like Mike Trout, you at least have to be able to say, yeah, this is definitely worth it. These guys are close to big league ready, because otherwise you're just going to waste Ohtani's career if you trade Trout for a guy or a group of prospects who are going to be ready in about 5 years.
Yeah, you're right. The answer clearly is sell at as much as you can without destroying your team more than it already is. You're in fourth place now, 24 games behind your division rival, 12 games behind the closest wild card team that you're chasing. You don't have a head coach anymore. You're battling bad luck and injuries and just all in all suckiness. It is time to move those big pieces. And that's not just the rentals that you brought in at the beginning of the year, but honestly, I think at this point in time, they do look to dish Ohtani because he doesn't have as much control on his. I mean, they locked up Trout for ages. They knew exactly what they were doing. Ohtani, he is getting antsy. Anyone in baseball can tell. And especially with teams calling saying, look, this is the guy that we're after. This would be our, big move to get further into the postseason. What's it going to take? I think that they'd be silly not to listen to those deals and see what works best for them come, 3 years down the line. Trout is a lot different. That is who everyone thinks of when they think of your team. He's been the face of that franchise since he came into the league. He is the reason that you're still selling tickets on kids' night for $5 because you can't sell them any other way. He's the reason that you still have jersey sales. He's the reason that you've been able to go on. He is the Griffey of that team. And so if they gutted the team that much, they would be saying, we're done for years. We'll try again in the foreseeable future. Please don't quit on us entirely. And that's not going to go well for them.
My thing with the Angels is you have two generational talents. I don't think they're going to give up that easily. Even I think they're going to push limits when we think there's no doubt they should give up, that this whole project isn't working. I think they're going to continue to push the boundaries, because I think that's what these higher ups would do. There's no doubt that Jerry Dipoto, if you put him in the same situation, he's going to keep pushing no, these guys, we need to keep,
because his job depends on it, not because it's going to work out for the best.
But I'm thinking as a GM, what should they do? Again, if I was the GM of the Angels right now, I'd do the exact same thing. I'd continue to push the boundaries. You don't get these guys very often. Mike Trout and Shohei, we've never seen a Shohei Ohtani. The closest you can even compare to him is Babe Ruth. How long did we go without seeing a guy who can hit as well as guys like Ohtani and Ruth can, and then go out there and pitch, be an absolute ace on the mound as well? It just doesn't happen. To give up a guy like that, because it if you look back at where Ohtani was when he first came over to the States, they didn't know how to use him at all. Those first handful of years were just wastes. Nothing even remotely close to success was happening there because they didn't know how to handle it. Last year, they figured it out. This year, they know what they're doing. Again, I think you'd be an absolute fool to not run it back one more time with these guys. Invest in some maybe better options starting pitching next season instead of going for that big splash who could potentially be a Cy Young if they can turn back the clock like Syndergaard, and maybe get some of these smaller pieces that are more consistent. Potentially, I'd hate to lose him, but I'm just using him as an example, a Chris Flex and a guy who you know what you're going to get instead of this big splash that there's just too many question marks around. I think it's more about the Angels spending what money they do have a little bit better than they have in the past.
But the problem with that is they've been doing that for far too long. I mean, it's been 10 years of this hokey pokey, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. That 10 years in a row Band-Aid approach, Mariner fans will tell you it does not work. You can't have those 1 or 2 pillars and then just patchwork everything together a little bit differently every year and hope that 2 + 2 starts equaling 5. It's never going to change. Angels have tried it 14 different ways. They've had the GM research everything they could. They've had the owner get involved. The owner signings have been the worst thing about the Angels. You got Pujols, and it was like, oh no, this is going to be bringing in all of the ticket sales, and he's going to be reinvigorated, and it collapses for yet another reason. It's like they're playing bingo of what's the reason that we missed this year.
And here's where I'm gonna have to disagree, because I think there's the Angels have gone for it. And like you said, there's pieces that just haven't worked out, but they're going for it in the wrong way. What's been the biggest issue for the Angels over the last decade? Starting pitching. How many starting pitchers for the Angels can you name over the last decade? I know you can name Weaver, but not because of his success with the Angels. It's been other things. You just need to go after pitching. There's a glaring hole on the Angels. Everyone can see they don't invest in pitching. Same thing with the Rangers right now. You got to invest in the issue instead of trying to get, here's the one giant piece that there's a lot of question marks about. And like Syndergaard, too many injury questions. I did not like that signing immediately. I thought they were spending too much money on him. You got to find little pieces to fill that hole instead of just one big piece, which is what they've tried to do. And I think you got to take the different approach, because I disagree. I don't think they've tried multiple different ways. I think it's always the one big piece. Let's see what works now. This team looks almost exactly the same as they did last year, except they had Noah Syndergaard.
But at the same time, it's not going to be, if you're an Angels fan, you're not going to see Chris Flexen, and you're not going to see, bringing up a couple of your Brashes and your Kirby, maybe the Kirby. Everyone knew that he was going to be great coming out. Gilbert, it was like, is this going to work out? Is this going to take a few years? I feel like that team has actually said, no, we are putting those small pieces into play without making those big splashes. That's not been working. Now we do have to sign Thor. Now we do have to go to Japan and get their Babe Ruth to help not only our offense, but our pitching. And it just continuously is hit and miss.
I just wholeheartedly disagree. I don't think they've ever really, they might give you the lip service, like, yeah, we're making these small moves, but you don't see them. If you're making small moves, why is our team look exactly the same as it always does? They got to commit to trying something new, trying a new fix. And that starts with a new manager, because man, that whole situation is not getting any better either. We'll go ahead and move on from the Angels. We're going to have to agree to disagree for this one. Let's go to our last team. We're going to talk about the Miami Marlins. This team, last week was right there in the playoff hunt, right there in the wild card, kind of fallen back a little bit, and they continue to have issues on offense, continue to have a great young rotation, which you had a lot of question marks about coming into this season.
I have
proven you wrong.
Yes.
But that lineup is just absolutely atrocious. Some of the guys that they have that they could trade: Jesus Aguilar, Garrett Cooper, who is an all-star, and Pablo Lopez is one that a lot of people are talking about. One of those young pitchers. Could he move? I think the Marlins, it's time to sell. And I think moving a guy like Pablo Lopez would be a great move. Get some offensive production back, some young offensive guys, and then maybe you'll have that lineup that can help at least give these pitchers a fighting chance, because, man, they are working their tails off, just getting absolutely no run support.
Yeah, and they also have, a decent generation coming up that they're hoping to plug into place. The time of death should have been called. Jazz's back injury being out another 6 weeks. It's done. It's time to sell. It's not going to work out. The season is slipping away. Fortunately, like you mentioned, Miami has something that literally every other team in baseball is desperate for, and that is arms, starting pitching. There's absolutely no way that Alcantara is gonna go anywhere. But Lopez, yes, I could absolutely see him being moved, and it would be a smart thing to do. Like you said, bring in a couple young guys that will help you out in the next 3-4 years with your offense, while your prospects are coming into play for your next generation of pitching. Aguilar, same thing. I bet that they wish that they could move Garcia, but with that contract, there's no way. They'd have to take a hit or include a prospect just to get rid of him, and that's not going to happen. So they're going to have to eat that one, or hope that something clicks and he turns around. But yeah, I agree. It's time to sell again. Not a tear down sell, but help yourself over the next few years, because that division could be yours real soon.
And Garcia could be a package deal with Lopez, almost like a Suarez Winker trade, where they're trading for one guy and you're just gonna have to eat the contract of another to get that guy. That gives me similar vibes there. I think that would really get the Marlins leaning.
That decreases what you could get for Lopez.
I'm not so sure it does, because it clears the books, and you're still going to have to get something back, because you're giving up a guy in Garcia who's, I mean, we've seen he can play at the big league level. He's struggling now. But again, I think Lopez is viewed higher as Jesse Winker was, and we saw what the Mariners gave up. They didn't give up a ton, but they gave up a decent package in return to eat that contract. I think the Marlins would get a little bit more in return for Pablo Lopez.
We could take Lopez and Garcia. I mean, that's right up Jerry's alley. So
we can't, because we have to trade for Juan Soto. That'll do it, though, for our buying and selling. Just 2 real trades thus far, and that was, a month ago, Carlos Santana traded from the Royals to the Mariners, and then Daniel Vogelbach recently traded from the Pirates to the Mets.
I still love it.
Jacob's a big Vogelbach guy. Me, not so much.
He's gonna help. He's gonna help make my World Series prediction come true. So,
well, we'll see. The Braves are right on the Mets' backs right now. That is going to be an interesting division to watch as the season comes to a close. So next week we'll obviously talk about a lot of the trades that have gone down from now to our recording the next episode. So a lot will happen for sure. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it is time for the Montreal Expos / Washington Nationals Mount Rushmore. This one was actually way tougher than I had anticipated coming into it. We'll break it all down. That's coming up next year on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. We're going to hop right into our Expos/Nationals Mount Rushmore. And this one was very, very tough for me. I had a couple names in my head when I was coming into this that ended up just getting bumped all the way down. I have a lot of guys. I think I have three that a lot of people expect, and I know you have three that a lot of people expect. But that fourth one was so hard to make a decision on, but we'll get to that here in a moment. We're going to start things off with number one on the list, and that is one of the greatest catchers in the history of baseball, and that is Gary Carter. Carter, an incredible team, did get a World Series ring, but after, he left Montreal, was just the face of the Expos for a while. So such a special career, incredible defensively, but he was pretty solid on offense too. His career slash line was 272, 345, 461 with the Expos, hit 215 career home runs, 794 RBIs, 1,365 hits, and 805 OPS. As a catcher, you can't really ask for too much more than what Gary Carter gave you because, man, behind the plate was where he was really, really special.
You mentioned one of the greatest catchers of all time, and his defense was a huge part of that. Almost 800 of his career 1,200 assists as a catcher, not even including his other positions, I'll get to that in a minute, came as an Expo. Over 800 catcher assists. Came in second place as a Rookie of the Year voting. Also got second and third place in MVP voting in a couple of different years. 7-time All-Star, 3 Golden Glove, 2 Silver Slugger. You mentioned the stats, just an incredible offensive production for a catcher. Hall of Famer wearing an Expos cap. He was drafted as a shortstop, converted to a catcher, played a little bit of first base, third base, and outfield. I have never known of a catcher to do anything even remotely similar to that. It's just insane what he was able to do for that team.
Unbelievable. One of 3 Expos that have gone into the Hall of Fame wearing an Expos hat. We're going to touch on the other 2 here coming up.
And I think the only one that's actually happy about his Expo hat.
that might be true. Let's go ahead and move on to number 2. Again, another Hall of Famer, Tim Raines Sr. Again, just as consistent of a player as you could ask for, extremely underrated in his career. He'd set the table for whoever was hitting behind him. He was getting on base, and he was going to let you go to work from there. 301, 390, 438 slash line, just 96 home runs, wasn't a power guy, 552 RBIs. He did take advantage when he had runners on for him. 775 walks, so controlled the strike zone. 1,598 hits. That's all with the Expos, and an 828 OPS. Again, just a table setter, a guy who was going to go up there. He's going to get on base and let the big guys behind him go to work, driving those runs. And that's exactly what they did. He was part of some special Expos teams.
Yeah. One of the best leadoff hitters in the history of the sport. Consecutive 7-time All-Star, winning the All-Star MVP once, and he got a Silver Slugger as well. Another player who I mentioned it, when we were talking about the caps that they're wearing in Cooperstown, kind of mistreated by the club in the late 80s scandals, but he amassed quite a few franchise records in his 13 seasons with the club. Like you said, kind of underrated, just under the radar, top producer his entire career.
A very, very great ball player. And like you said, one of the best leadoff hitters. I mean, you don't see leadoff hitters too much like you used to, the Ricky Hendersons, Ichiro, those kind of leadoff hitters are kind of gone and moved on. We still have George Springer who can do it all leading off for the Blue Jays, but those guys who could hit for power, he just got on base. That was his thing. He was not going to hit the home runs like Ricky Henderson was going to. He was more like the Ichiro that, hey, I'm going to get on base.
Fast forward another month.
Put one in the gap. We have an early lead. Yep. Let's go ahead and move on to number 3, and that is going to be the Hawk, Andre Dawson. Another Hall of Famer for the Expos. Of course, a lot of people know him more as a Chicago Cub, and he'd rather be remembered as a Cub, but he had such a great career with the Expos. way more seasons than he had as a Chicago Cub. 280, 326, 476 slash line with the Expos, 225 home runs, 838 RBIs, 1,575 hits, an 802 OPS, and another guy who just played such good defense. Anything hitting the air out there toward the outfield, the Hawk was going to have a chance to make a play on.
Yeah, just a phenomenal outfielder. Like you mentioned, he was very proud to be a Cub. That was where a majority of his achievements took place. He was actually very publicly disappointed that he was forced to go into the hall wearing an Expos logo. But before his Expos career ended in that just awful late 80s owner scandal and collusion, they called it, he had more than 10 fantastic years with the team. He did win Rookie of the Year, 3 All-Star games, 6 Golden Gloves, 3 Silver Sluggers, and almost nabbed a couple of MVPs as well. And what I loved most about him, he was one of the first just real students of the game. He was constantly in the dugout with his scratch paper. He was recording pitcher tendencies. Before that was even a thing, he took it upon himself to master his craft and to study. Baseball is what it is today because of those statistics that he was paying attention to before anyone else.
Yeah, and an all-time commercial as well, where he pops out of the ivy in Wrigley Field asking what year is it. I mean, right. He'd be flying into walls no matter what team he was a part of. Just such a special defender. Incredible career for him. Now we're going to get into number 4. This is where we're going to veer away from one another. We went separate directions, same time frame, same era though, from the most part. I went with the one guy who can really call himself Mr. National. That is Ryan Zimmerman. Was on the very first Washington Nationals team, just retired at the end of last season, spent his entire career in DC with the Nationals. I mean, he is to the Nationals what a guy like Edgar Martinez is to the Mariners, what Ernie Banks is to the Cubs, Al Kaline to the Tigers. You know, that is what he was known for. The number 4 pick in the 2005 draft, the first ever draft pick by the Washington Nationals under, that moniker, and just did it all. Only made 2 All-Star games in his 16 years with the Nationals, but was very consistent, could play third, could play first. Always a dangerous guy to see come in the game late as a pinch hitter. Also got to be a part of that 2019 World Series run. Just a special year for the Nationals all around there. His career with the Nationals, 277, 341, 475 slash line, 284 home runs, 1,061 RBIs, 646 walks, 1,846 hits, an 816 OPS, first in games, at bats, hits, home runs, RBIs, doubles, total bases, extra base hits, whatever category you want. Ryan Zimmerman's going to be right up there towards the top. If he's not at the top, just Mr. National. I mean, he's the first guy you really think of. And I honestly wasn't even going to be too concerned about the stats because I know what this guy meant to Washington. I've heard from Nationals fans how important this guy was to the franchise and how they view him. It just made no sense to not have Ryan Zimmerman on this list.
Yeah, and see, he definitely made my honorable mentions, but I just could not give it to Mad Max. Just an insane career with Washington. It's honestly a crying shame that the team lost their appetite for winning because they had a lot of grade A pieces to build that franchise around. 6 All-Star games, 2 Cy Youngs, a ton of additional Cy Young and MVP considerations. One of very few pitchers to reach 20 strikeouts in a game. He didn't even need extra innings to do it. 2 no-hitters in the same season. Don't forget, he helped that club win that World Series title. 92-47 overall record with the club, 2.80 ERA, under 1 WHIP, over 1,600 strikeouts, 11 complete games, and almost 40 WAR. I mean, just such a phenomenal pitcher that he's such a great pitcher that they're still paying him $15 million to pitch against them this year. I mean, it's just it's insane.
One of the greatest free agent signings of all time when they
multiple times.
Yeah.
That
initial 7-year deal was unbelievable. Just baffling to see what that turned into. I had Max Scherzer 100% on my honorable mentions. He was the first one I had on the honorable mentions. So there you have it. There's our 4. We also want to rattle off our honorable mentions before we recap the 4. I had Max Scherzer, Steve Rogers, no, not Captain America, but he, I guess to quote Captain America, could go all day on the mound. Incredible career for him. Also, Vladimir Guerrero Sr. and Bryce Harper, who was the face of that franchise for a long time, the poster child of that team. You want to go over your honorable mentions?
I didn't have any that you didn't, so not too much else to say. You had a lot of guys that had really great years with the club that had better careers elsewhere. It just didn't quite have the service time. Vladdy Sr., if he was an Expo his entire career, would have been a no-brainer. Steve Rogers, Zimmerman was another one of mine, of course. So yeah, pretty well talented ball clubs.
Brought in a lot of guys who, just had a cup of coffee, but made a big time impact with that squad. So there's our top 4. Again, Gary Carter, Tim Raines Sr., Andre Dawson, and Ryan Zimmerman were my Mount Rushmore. Jacob, you had Gary Carter, Tim Raines Sr., Andre Dawson, and Max Scherzer on your Mount Rushmore. So there you go. A hard one, but man, the Expos and Nationals, special franchises again, bring the Expos back. The color scheme, the location, everything was just so cool about the ball club, the uniforms. That team was awesome.
Everything except for the name. I don't know. It seems have something, not the Expo, like the World Trade Expo. That no, have it be something cool.
It's like the marker. Expo markers are cool, man. We'll see if Montreal
ever get erased easily. How about that?
Exactly. We'll see if Montreal ever gets a team again. Next week, we will head back to the West Coast. We're going to talk about the San Diego Padres next week. The team that's closest to you now, kind of your home team for a little bit. Hopefully not too much longer.
Don't say that. No.
But it's going to be a fun one. Spoiler, Tony Gwynn's going to be on the list, and then we'll go from there.
Maybe the statue outside was a...
Yeah, Tony Gwynn was so good. We might put Tony Gwynn Jr. on that as well. He played in the major leagues for a little bit, but that's how good Tony Gwynn was. But that'll be next week. The San Diego Padres coming up on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. But coming up next, our final segment will be about the NFL. We're going to talk some football, some teams that missed the playoffs last year that we think could make the jump to getting into the field, getting to Super Wild Card Weekend here this season. That is coming up on the Kingsmen Sports Podcast.
There are many ways for businesses to expand their customer base, but one of the tried and true ways of increasing customer loyalty and recognizing employees is to put your name and logo on promotional and motivational items. You can find a wide selection at Alderson's Awards West Printwares in Centralia. Shirts, hats, coats, mugs, pens, and more, all with high-quality screen printing or embroidery done on site. For a full catalog of items at great prices, go to aldersons.net, and remember, you will get maximum impact at Awards West Printwares.
The NFHS Learning Center is the leader in online education for the interscholastic community. At nfhslearn.com, you can find over 70 courses, including more than 30 free courses, such as concussion in sports, heat illness prevention, sudden cardiac arrest, and protecting students from abuse. To learn more, visit the NFHS Learning Center.
Welcome back to the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Let's go ahead and finish up this episode. We're going to talk some football. Again, we talked about it before the break. And we are looking at 4 teams that missed the playoffs last year that we could see making them this year. I guess I will go ahead and start with, I think, maybe the easiest one, and that is the Los Angeles Chargers, who, were just a handful of seconds away from getting in the playoffs last year. Justin Herbert, an incredible talent at quarterback. Austin Eckler, unbelievable wide receiver that can do it all. He can run, he can catch. And then Keenan Allen, you got Mike Williams at receiver. You got a good line on offense. And then your defense has all the potential in the world. I just don't see how this team misses again. They're in a very loaded division, but I think it's time for Justin Herbert to really take over. I think this is going to be his biggest year yet. And that leads to the Chargers getting to the playoffs, whether they win the division or get a wild card.
Yeah, that entire division, it seems like they could go 11-6 or 6-11, and I wouldn't be shocked either way. It seems like something's got to break there. Chargers could have a really good year. Broncos could be having that same really good year. So it just, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that.
Now that division gets to play the AFC South. So, I mean, they get to beat up on, no offense, but some not as good teams that they could face in other divisions.
Oh, the AFC South is a very weak division. So that
absolutely
behooves everyone. Yeah, I don't know. Every year I think to myself about the time we start drafting for fantasy football, and I'm like, is this the year that Keenan Allen has to start slowing down? Is this the year that he really takes that step back that we just see happen all the time with the Julio Jones and the apparently Michael Thomas for the drop of a hat, and just everyone, Father Time goes after wide receivers real quick, and he just keeps proving me wrong and saying, nope, it's not there yet. Luckily, I usually trade for him about halfway through the season because somebody's starting to lose faith, but or trade him. Shush.
I've gotten him in some leagues around the trade deadline, and the only thing that's ever really slowed him down is the ACL injuries, the knee injuries. If he's not hurt, he is on the field, he is producing. And so far it looks like they did some sort of futuristic surgery to make him even stronger with the knee, because he has only gotten better. It's unbelievable. And now he's got a very good quarterback throwing the football.
And usually those wide receivers coming back from the ACL can't cut as well as they used to. And it just seems like that's not the case. Yeah, I have a lot more faith in their quarterback under Herbert, but I don't know. That entire division, it could be an absolute coin flip there.
I think you had a team from that division on your list. Do you want to go ahead and start there while we're in the West?
I was talking about the Broncos, and I mean, they got Russell Wilson. You can't sneeze at that. I know it's a new quarterback to a new system with a new head coach, but at the same time, they've had the weapons that they needed. They just needed a quarterback that could make the plays and get the ball off consistently into the hands of those targets. Defense is a little shakier than it used to be, but like I said, it would not surprise me one way or the other if the Broncos found their way in there, if Raiders continued their, minor success sneaking in, if the Chiefs are done, or if they keep going, that entire division just could do whatever, and I wouldn't be shocked.
Again, the Raiders making the playoffs last year almost beat Cincinnati at Wild Card Weekend. That was a very fun game. They obviously got better. I'm not buying the Broncos until I actually see it on the field. They have too many young guys who we hear that they're incredible talents. We haven't seen anything from them, though. Cortland Sutton, heard all this about how great of a receiver he is. Jerry Jeudy, they haven't done much. I know they haven't had a quarterback throwing the ball, but for me, I have to see it before I put too much in it, too much investment in it. So I need to see how Wilson and, of course, new head coach Nathaniel Hackett, I have to see how they mesh. I know Nathaniel Hackett, he's coming from being the offensive coordinator in Green Bay. Russell Wilson isn't Aaron Rodgers. Russell Wilson has a completely different skill set. He's better in some areas, I guess you could say, and worse in some areas, most areas, but I digress. But it's going to be interesting to see how they mesh together. I think the relationship will work out. I just don't know if the first year is going to be able to take off like they're anticipating and get them to the playoffs, especially like you said, in that division where they're gonna have to figure out a way to beat guys like Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Derek Carr, who are all still in the same system where they've had a lot of success.
It wouldn't surprise me though, with how things were going in Seattle, if Russell Wilson took more of the offensive duties and actually, if it's a new coach and a new system and a new quarterback, if more of that responsibility gets put on his shoulders to figure out what is going to work for his team that he's leading.
I also think Russ has to get used to, he can't run like he used to. He's not, this superhuman that doesn't get hurt anymore. He's coming off a bad finger injury, which he rushed back from, no matter if he were 1,800 hours a day to try and get back on the field, whatever bull crap he was telling people. But I mean, he's not the same quarterback anymore. I'm not saying, he's not a top 10 quarterback anymore, but his skill sets are changing. The Broncos offensive line, I don't think is super sensational, which has always been Wilson's issue in Seattle. So again, I need to see it before I have any investment. Best case scenario for them that I can see this year still doesn't have them getting in the playoffs in that loaded division. So we will see. Let's move on to our second teams. I'm going purple in the AFC North, and I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens. I hate the color purple. I'm just going to put that out there right now. But the Ravens, that whole division is much worse than they were last year. The Steelers, Ben's gone. I don't know how much worse they got with, Trubisky and Pickett coming in, because Ben was just a shell of himself. They could be right around the same, and they snuck in the playoffs. And then you also have the Browns, who are just a disaster right now. We won't even touch them. That team's going to be awful this year. Just get used to it. And the Bengals, I mean, were they a flash in the pan? Did they just get hot at the right time? We got to see what happens there. I think that's the team to beat in the division still. But I mean, Lamar Jackson's just a freak athlete. They've made some good moves to go out there and get some more weapons to try and help him out. And of course, the running backs were a big issue last year. They had guys dropping like flies. Now, hopefully those guys are healthy. J.K. Dobbins can get out on the field, and they have a pretty solid defense. So I think the Ravens, I don't see them winning the division. Like I said, I think the Bengals are the team to beat, but I think they sneak into a wild card and they really capitalize on a weak division and the AFC West beating up on one another.
I don't know if I can get behind that or not. I agree with you 100%. Bengals are the team to beat. I do not think it was a flash in the pan. I think that they are a incredibly strong team, and they will continue to be that. I don't know how far of a step back the Steelers are going to be taking. That defense is incredible. I like Kenny Pickett. I think that he might get the start sooner than what people are kind of anticipating. And I think that he fits in that system. I think with how easily they transitioned from the aging Ben, who, like you said, was not doing that team any favors, to Trubisky as kind of a stopgap, to Rudolph even at times. I feel like going with a super skilled rookie with the weapons that they have, I think that they're going to sneak out and stay that number 2 team there. Do I think that that's not a diss to the Ravens? I think that they are going to be capable. I don't see them going sub 500 by any means, but you said, they have to prove it. I need to see a full season without them getting hurt, without them facing adversity that just makes them not get there.
I mean, they had the season a few years ago that I really bought in on, and that's when they got the number 1 seed. I know they flopped in the playoffs, but I just think Lamar's too talented. I'm not one of those people who, he's just a running back. I think Lamar's a pretty solid player, a very great weapon to have. And I think the running backs are going to be the big key for the Ravens this year. Who's your number 2 team that you had on there?
The Colts. I gotta see my Colts go further. And it all depends on how the quarterback works out. I would still love to see another wide receiver signing or acquisition of some sort, get an additional weapon there, because wide receiver and tight end are their weakest spots right now. But the defense is incredible. Everyone got to see what their running game could do last year. I don't think that that's going anywhere. I think that they've made strides to even improve on that. Their offensive line is still one of the best in the game. It all depends on quarterback. It really, really does. Does Matt Ryan have enough in the tank? Have they made the preparations to hand that baton off if it's not working out, or even if it is working out, but they want to go to that next level? I don't think that they've made the moves that they need to get super deep into the playoffs. I don't see them as a Super Bowl team the way that they are right now. I think that you do need an elite quarterback to reach it at this stage in the NFL. But especially with how weak that division is, I see them making the playoffs without too much of a struggle.
My biggest question, or the biggest deciding factor for me on the Colts, is the health of Derrick Henry. I think if Derrick Henry comes back and he is not 100%, I think they have a cakewalk into the playoffs. I just think that they run through that division, dominate those division games, and just easily march right in to wild card weekend. But if Derrick Henry comes back and he looks strong, the Colts, I think I'm not going to say that the Titans are going to run away with that division. It's going to be for me, a 50-50 coin flip on which quarterback plays better, Tannehill or Matt Ryan. I trust Matt Ryan's weapons a little bit more than I trust the Titans. Weapons is a term that I don't know if it exactly applies, because both these teams have some issues at wide receiver. And we now know, of course, with the signing today, that Matt Ryan and Julio will not reconnect in Indy, with Julio signing with the Buccaneers. So just the Colts defense is very solid. I like the pick. I told you before we went on, I was going to talk about them, but I knew you were going to, so I didn't even worry about it. I think you're 100% right. I see this team winning that division and getting back to the playoffs. And I think you also nailed it by saying they're not going to make a deep run. I don't even know if they'll make it past wild card weekend. If they get to the divisional round, that is a very, very successful season for the Colts, in my opinion.
And what I learned last year was that even with their quarterback situation, they weren't out of any game. And I know there were some games that, it was 3 or 4 bad key moment throws that it was like Wentz lost the game there. And I know that it's never, one play at a time, but it just seemed like it didn't matter if they were playing, the Titans or the Bucks or the Raiders, they were never out of it, even in that position. And I feel like to just write them off as I don't see them going past wild card week. I do. I think that they have a chance. It gets really rough when you go into those January games.
I like I said, I don't see them making it past wild card weekend. They were in almost every game except for week 18, when all they had to do was beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they couldn't do it. That moment that lingers. And I know Carson Wentz is gone. He was a big problem, but there were all sorts of issues in that game. They couldn't run. They couldn't do anything on offense, and the Jaguars moved the ball pretty well against a very good defense. So, that still lingers. Like I said, I think they're going to the playoffs. I just don't see them beating any of the potential matchups they have on wild card weekend. Now we'll move to our final teams, and this one's not going to be fun for me. Your brother, Sean, my cousin, he's going to be on this podcast one of these days. Big Vikings fan, and I've heard a lot about, hey, you don't talk about the Vikings enough. You haven't talked about the Vikings. All right, here's your time. I'm going to talk about the Vikings because I think the Vikings get a wild card spot this season. They get to the playoffs. I make a lot of jokes about Kirk Cousins. I don't think he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's going to win you a playoff game. Again, I see them getting to wild card weekend and getting bounced. He doesn't win those big games. But, this team just has too much talent to not rack up regular season wins and at least get into the playoffs. Dalvin Cook is a monster. He can run it. He's also a great pass catcher. They have a very dangerous 1-2 on offense or at receiver with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Irv Smith Jr. there's a lot of hype around him at tight end if he can stay healthy. I'm worried about their defense, which is why I have them as a wild card. They went out and got Zadarius Smith. Their pass rushers just have too much of a recent injury history, some serious injuries as well. So that gives me a lot of concern for them, competing with Green Bay in that division. I know I'm a Packers fan, but I'm looking at that as unbiased as I can. In the secondary, I just don't know if there's enough there to slow down some of these, top tier teams who have just incredible quarterbacks and really, really good receiving cores, like say the Rams, the Cardinals, the Cowboys even, I think could really take advantage of that defense. I think the Vikings, they're definitely on the right path, especially with Zimmer now gone, but it's going to take some time to get this new system, establish what you want your football team to look like and then go from there. I think they could be close to really being a thorn in the Packers side for that division.
And seems like they're the ones that are getting closer every year. I mean, every once in a while we hear the Bears making a splash with their latest quarterback free trial, and it never seems to work, and they have to cancel that before it auto renews on their credit card. But it seems like they are the ones that are constantly, okay, this piece is going to work for a little while. Let's focus on another piece. Okay, this is going, and especially with, I'm going to be honest, Packers are taking a step back this year. And I think that the Vikings are in a position where they can take advantage of that a lot more than some of the other teams. That's another division like the AFC North, where you have two decently well-rounded teams, maybe focusing on one or two players a little heavily, and then you have two teams that don't know what they're doing, and they're just going to beat up on those two other teams, except when the Colts play the Jaguars. But other than that, I just, there's not too much to say. I don't think that's too hot of a take. I think that they're going.
All right, let's quickly get through this last one because the AC is broken and I'm dying. You've got one more on your list. Who is that?
Yeah, the last one I'm going to talk about are the Dolphins sneaking in for a wild card over the Patriots. I can finally say I don't mind the Patriots anymore. It feels good to be able to say that. But the moves that the Dolphins made this year, we talked about them with our wide receiver target segment. They are a very, very good looking offense, and I could see them very easily snagging that wild card from Patriots that aren't really too sure what they need to fix sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know what I think of Mac Jones yet. I think it's way too early.
I love it.
I'm very curious. I don't know if he can go out there and win a Super Bowl, though. I don't know if he can consistently put you in the playoff. I mean, they got to the playoffs in their run game and their defense last year. Mac Jones did not really have to do too much. That was part of the plan. They didn't want to throw him into the fire. So now it's time. Yep. All right, now you got to put his feet in. Can he survive the heat? Can he get the job done? Can he make the throw when you need him to? That's all to be determined. I can't say one way or another because I literally don't know. I have no idea if he can or not. That defense is going to be solid. They're going to run the football very well. But again, if you become too one-dimensional, teams are going to start really zoning in on that ground game, and they're going to start shutting it down. And the Dolphins, I mean, we keep talking about it's put up or shut up time for Tua. What can you do? Can you get the job done? He's got Tyreek Hill. There's no more excuses that he doesn't have good receivers because he also has Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki. I mean, he's got the weapons. The defense is solid. That defense is going to ball out. Once again, they're not in a super strong division. You know, you have to go out there. You're not going to beat out the Bills for the division, I don't think. I think the Dolphins are still a little ways from there. But, I mean, you're going to beat up on the Jets. You should. Can you take out the Patriots? Can you knock off the Patriots and slip by them? The Patriots are playing a little bit of a harder schedule since they finished second last year. Dolphins have a couple of those games against third place teams. So it's going to be very interesting, that race for the AFC wildcards. I mean, we could see all four teams from the West make it and then just division winners from elsewhere. It's going to be very fascinating. It's a very top heavy league, I think.
Yes,
we're going to learn a lot very early about those AFC teams, and I cannot wait for football season. That'll do it, though, for this episode of the Kingsmen Sports Podcast. Once again, thank you guys so much for the support. We always love seeing the comments on our videos. We love talking with you guys, you know, listening to see what you say about this Mount Rushmore, who you think should have been on it. We can't get enough of it. We absolutely love it. We also got to hear the Mariners announcers Dave Sims and Mike Blowers talk about Dave Stieb. I think that confirms their listeners of the podcast. So you're not going to want to miss out on all these guys that we're bringing up, that we're digging up, that you might have not known about from the past. It is an absolute blast. Next week, we will be off. There will be no new episode next week. I think I accidentally said that we'd be talking about the Padres. Just too many meetings and stuff going on. So we're going to take a week off. There will be Mariners minis, though. We will have one hopefully up this Thursday, and then we'll recap the road trip next week. And we'll throw up an episode there. So 2 episodes of Mariners minis at least coming up before the next episode of the Kingsmen in 2 weeks. And we will probably make a post next week talking about what will be on the show in 2 weeks. Got to make the decisions there. And then, of course, baseball world always changes. We're definitely going to talk about the MLB trade deadline, the moves that happen. That'll be coming up here in a couple weeks on the Kingsman Sports Podcast.